Hi everybody, welcome back to Raw Food Philosophy on YouTube. In this video I'd like to talk about what does a gorilla know about nutrition. So on the screen here I just have a picture of a gorilla on Wikipedia, and the question to consider for this video is what does a gorilla know about what we consider nutritional knowledge. What does a gorilla know about getting the right mix of its macronutrients? Getting the right mix of its fats, its proteins, and its carbohydrates. What does a gorilla know about amino acids or peptides? What does a gorilla know about getting all of its vitamins and minerals? Getting the right amount of its vitamin A, its vitamin C, its potassium, its calcium, its iron. What does a gorilla know about getting its B12 vitamin? The answer, as far as we can tell, is basically nothing. A gorilla is not thinking about nutrition in the way that we, in modern times, kind of humans have started thinking about nutrition in terms of breaking things down into their component parts, breaking things down into molecules and different vitamins, and giving all these different component parts names and thinking about nutrition in that sense. A gorilla and all the animals, as far as we can tell, basically just know when they look at the world, what do they find as appetizing to eat, and are they hungry at the time? And in more specific terms, what are they hungry for at the time? And they follow their appetites and they eat raw food. And that is kind of how the natural world works as far as diet. If you look at a gorilla too, kind of as a side note, a gorilla has a very low protein diet. Gorillas are mostly eating shoots and leaves, a lot of bamboo, a lot of leaves, a lot of fruit. They do eat a little bit of like grubs as far as kind of a protein source, but they're not eating, they're not getting what we would consider an optimal amount of protein. When you think about a lot of the recommendations out there, especially recently in our culture, like protein has just been everywhere. You see protein cereal, everything's like labeled as, I've seen like protein, protein sprinkled chips. A gorilla is not getting anywhere near the amount of protein when we think about complete proteins that we would consider optimal. And yet gorillas are some of the strongest animals on the face of the earth. A gorilla carries far more muscle mass than a typical human being. And a gorilla would tear apart a human limb from limb if it wanted to. And yet it's not getting these, this optimal amount of protein that we've been told that we need. So, to me, that's just a cue, a sign that we have to be thinking about things wrong in terms of nutrition. It can't just be kind of some universal law that you need, a gram of protein per pound of body weight to maintain muscle, because there's clearly all these animals. A horse is another example of an animal that doesn't really have a high protein diet, and yet a horse is, basically a ball of muscle. So, this question to me just, it brings to a head to me, the ideas around a raw food diet that a gorilla and the animals don't need to know what we are talking about as nutritional knowledge. They just need to follow their appetites, eat ideal foods, right? Eat raw and living foods, the foods that you would find and eat in their natural form. Follow their appetite once they identify those foods, and then just live. A gorilla is mostly meandering around. In our terms, it's getting its steps in. It's foraging, it's looking for food, but it's not even really taking a lot of effort for a gorilla to maintain health and muscle mass. So, to me, this is just we're the odd ones. We are the ones that are cooking all these kinds of foods and modifying them, foods that we would not find and eat in their natural forms, and we're trying to, and that those form a bulk of our diet. So I think that following the lead of the animals seem to be doing just fine, looking for food in their natural environment. So I think that we would probably be best. We would have ideal nutrition if we were following that same idea, that we're just looking for foods that we would find and eat in their natural form in the environment. So just a question to consider. What do the animals know about nutrition? What does a gorilla know about nutrition? So I got a course created around these ideas, around changing your mindset. I think that once we have the right mindset, the longer I'm on a raw food diet, a high raw diet, the more I believe that it's just the easiest way to long-term and sustainable health. I've got a course listed in the description called Raw Food Philosophy on Udemy. So go ahead and check that out if you're interested in kind of thinking differently about food and experimenting with like a raw food diet, a more raw food diet and lifestyle. Check out the course, see if it's something you're interested in. I genuinely believe that once we change our mindset around food, once we find these ideal foods, then our appetites become natural, health becomes natural and easy. So check it out if you're interested, and we'll see you in the next one.